My name is Charlotte Ayers. I'm 66 years old, and I've been retired for a little less than 2 years. I get about $2,500 a month in Social Security benefits. In a small town in Ohio, that's enough to get by. As long as I watch every penny, it covers me just fine. My husband passed away young. After my son, Benjamin, got married, I've been on my own, living alone in this old house, keeping it warm with memories. At my age, isn't that what life is supposed to be about? Family gathered, laughter echoing through the halls. With Christmas just around the corner, Benjamin called to say he wanted me to spend the holidays with them this year. In that moment, my heart lit up like someone had handed me a steaming mug of hot chocolate in the dead of winter, filling me with a warmth so deep it reached right down to my bones. As soon as we hung up, I got right to work. I pulled an old suitcase from the back of the closet and wiped it down again and again until it was clean enough to catch a faint reflection. The new sweater I had been saving for the holidays was already neatly folded, waiting. One by one, I packed it along with a few other things: the smoked sausage rolls Benjamin adored as a boy, Amanda's favorite local honey, and a few homemade jams carefully, making sure not to forget a thing. As I was packing, my fingers brushed against an old, yellowed photograph. Benjamin was just a teenager in that picture, his wide grin beaming, those two little front teeth peeking through. Beside him stood a younger me, hair thick and black, a confident smile on my face, eyes brimming with a fierce, unwavering hope for life. The decades had passed in a flash. My whole life, I gave it all to this family, to Benjamin. When he was little, I worked shifts at the textile mill, nights, evenings, coming home so tired I could barely stand, just to make sure he had a better life. When the mill shut down, I sold goods at flea markets, did odd jobs, whatever it took. I fought tooth and nail so Benjamin could go to college, so he could have a good start in life. It was only when he was settled, married, with a stable life of his own, that I felt like I could finally breathe. Retirement has been simple, like a plain glass of water. It was only when I saw Benjamin and his family that life tasted a little sweeter. I just didn't know that sweet sip was already laced with poison. When I arrived at Benjamin's apartment building in Chicago, the elevator doors opened, and Amanda was already there, waiting. She smiled brightly and rushed toward me. "Charlotte, you finally made it. It was freezing outside. Come on in." She took my suitcase with cheerful hands, bustling about. Sit, I'll get you some hot tea to warm you up." Benjamin poked his head out from the study, a tired smile on his face. "Hey, Mom." He looked drained, with dark circles under his eyes. "Year-end is always a madhouse," he explained. "I've been working non-stop." I nodded, a pang of concern in my chest. "You only get one body, honey. Don't run it into the ground." Amanda quickly returned with a steaming mug of tea, the welcoming aroma filling the living room. The warmth from the radiators enveloped me. It was a world away from the chill of my own little house. Amanda tucked my suitcase into the guest room and hurried to start dinner. The spread she prepared was hearty and impressive: fragrant, juicy roast beef, tender, buttery pan-seared salmon, and a handful of bright, refreshing side dishes. Her cooking had improved immensely. I couldn't help but praise her, and she laughed, her eyes crinkling. "I'm so glad you like it. You should come more often. I'll cook for you every day." But for all her easy smiles, there was something a little too polished, a little too eager. She kept piling food onto my plate, pampering me with an almost flawless care, like a new jacket that doesn't quite sit right on the shoulders close, but not quite right. Meanwhile, Benjamin shoveled food down thoughtlessly, his eyes darting to his phone again and again, as if something was pulling at him. The table felt alive on the surface, but underneath, it was like a sliver of bone caught in my throat, impossible to swallow, impossible to spit out. The next morning, Amanda's parents arrived. As soon as they walked in, Patricia wrapped Amanda in a tight, loving hug. They chattered nonstop, their high-pitched laughter filling the room as if the rest of us had disappeared. I stood off to the side, invisible. For a moment, I almost felt myself fading into the wallpaper. Robert was more reserved. He shook my hand and exchanged a few pleasantries. Patricia, on the other hand, had the air of someone used to sitting behind a large desk. She'd worked in an office at City Hall before she retired, and it showed. She glanced at me sideways, her eyes scanning my worn wool coat, the one I'd had for years, thick and sturdy, warm even if it was a little dated, and she gave a little twitch of her lips that wasn't quite a smile. To her, I must have looked out of place. The coat that had always made me feel prepared, even proud, now suddenly felt thin and tired under her gaze. Dinner that night was laced with a subtle tension. Benjamin and Robert traded conversational snippets about the latest financial news, while Amanda and her mother chattered animatedly about neighborhood gossip, grocery store discounts, and whose kids had recently been promoted. I just sat there quietly, picking at my food, feeling like an outsider. Patricia's voice, sharp and forceful, soon commandeered the conversation. "Robert and I clear nearly $15,000 a month between our pensions," she said, lifting her teacup with practiced grace. She glanced at me, quick and appraising. "Our expenses are minimal, so life has been quite comfortable. We just bought a little condo down in Florida last month. It's perfect for the winter warm weather, clean air." She turned to Amanda with a smile. "You two should start planning ahead. Housing prices are only going up. Better to upgrade to a bigger house now, especially before any babies come along." Amanda nodded quickly. "We're working on it, Mom." Then Patricia's gaze shifted back to me, her tone dripping with false concern. "And Charlotte, how's your health holding up? Amanda told me your pension isn't very high. Are you able to cover your daily expenses?" Her voice was light, but there was a glint in her eye, a subtle but cutting judgment. I forced a calm smile, though something tightened in my chest. "I make about $2,500 a month. It's enough for my daily needs. My health is about the same, some old aches, but nothing serious." "Oh, 2,500. Patricia drew the words out, arching her eyebrows slightly, her voice filled with a delicate, almost imperceptible pity. I picked up my teacup, hiding behind it, concealing the sting of pride that washed over me. Only now, at this age, did I truly understand, for some people, your entire worth is summed up by the numbers in your bank account, and mine didn't even earn me a polite nod in their world. After dinner, Benjamin called Robert into the study to consult on some investment matters, leaving Amanda and Patricia on the living room sofa, half watching TV, half whispering to each other. I felt exhausted, not in my body, but deep down, where the hurt settles and won't leave. I excused myself, saying I needed to rest, and retreated to the guest room. It was a small room, but clean and bright. A small potted ivy sat on the nightstand, its leaves, lush and green, giving off a quiet, tenacious vitality. Inside me, though, everything felt heavy and stuck. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the window at the dull gray sky, my mind drifting. I thought about the winter Benjamin wanted those expensive basketball sneakers, how I worked a full week of night shifts at the warehouse just to afford them. I thought about his college years, when I sent him every hard-earned dollar while living on ramen noodles and tap water myself. I thought about his wedding, when I emptied my savings and even borrowed from friends to help him with the down payment on their first house. I've never done anything extraordinary in my life. All I ever tried to do was make things easier for my son. I always thought that would be enough, but now it felt like it was never even close. I stayed in the guest room for a long while before finally getting up, needing some air. I opened the door carefully and was about to step out when I heard low voices coming from the living room. It was Amanda and Patricia, speaking softly, their words quiet but clear as a bell in the silent house. "Mom, what is that old woman going to do with $2,500 a month? She gets by now, but what happens when she gets sick? Am I just supposed to drop everything and take care of her?" Amanda's voice, tinged with a barely concealed irritation, struck me like a hammer blow. My foot froze mid-step, pinned to the floor by an invisible force. "Exactly. I warned you," Patricia said coolly, her voice sharp and precise. "That measly pension of hers barely covers her expenses. If she gets sick, she'll be a burden on you." I held my breath, my palms slick with a cold sweat. I tried to retreat silently, but their words clawed at my ears, refusing to let go. "What's the point of keeping her around?" Amanda muttered, a low, bitter whisper that cut me to the core. $2,500 a month wouldn't even cover a halfway decent home care nurse. "That's why," Patricia said with a terrifying calm, "you need to get the house sorted out while she's still clear-headed. Get her to sign it over to you and Benjamin before it's too late." "The house?" Amanda sounded hesitant, but there was a greedier tone underneath. "That house is old, but it's in a good location. We could probably sell it for 300, maybe 400,000. "Exactly," Patricia pressed, her voice seasoned with a cold calculus. "You need to get it in your hands. Otherwise, if she loses her mind and leaves it to someone else, you'll have no one to blame but yourself. And besides," Amanda added softly, "she's been coughing a lot lately, and she looks pretty pale too. Who knows how much longer she'll hold on." Those words sliced through my heart like a blade, sharp and merciless. I felt the blood in my veins turn to ice. My limbs froze. Even breathing hurt. A pain, a rage, and a deep, gut-wrenching sense of betrayal washed over me, drowning me completely. I always thought that Amanda, despite her little moments of pettiness, at least respected me as her mother-in-law. I never realized that to her, I was just a negligible burden, an aging liability to be managed, perhaps even discarded when I became too heavy. All those smiles, the warm welcomes, the carefully prepared meals. It was all a performance. And now I had seen the script before the final act. I bit my lip so hard I could taste blood. Tears burned at the corners of my eyes, but I held them back. I couldn't fall apart here. I couldn't let them see me break. I backed into the guest room, moving like a defeated soldier, retreating from the battlefield. My chest felt torn open, but deep inside, a painful clarity took hold. I couldn't stay here another minute. This home, with its hot tea and cozy rooms, had become a gilded cage. Without hesitation, I yanked open my suitcase and started throwing my things back inside, one by one. My movements were cold and mechanical, as if I were burying the last shreds of my dignity. The new wool coat I'd bought for the holidays. The smoked sausage rolls I'd spent days preparing. The jar of homemade jam I'd wrapped so carefully. It all felt like a cruel joke now, mocking my foolish hopes. I fumbled for a pen on the nightstand and, with trembling hands, scribbled a short note. Our neighbor, Ellen, had an emergency. I went over to help. Don't worry. The handwriting was crooked and messy, a mirror of the chaos raging inside me. I took a deep breath, grabbed my suitcase, and quietly opened the door. In the living room, the television was still droning on. Amanda and Patricia were deep in conversation, laughing softly, oblivious to everything. Head down, I made my way to the door, slipped on my shoes, and silently opened the front door. In less than 30 seconds, I was outside. The wind hit my face, raw and biting, but no amount of winter air could match the chill that had already settled deep inside me. I didn't look back. I gripped the handle of my suitcase and just kept walking, one step after another, into the night. When I got back to my little house, the sky was already pitch black. I didn't bother turning on the lights. Fumbling in the dark, I made my way to the sofa and collapsed onto it, my body heavy and limp. The suitcase was abandoned by the door, slumped against the wall like a stray dog no one wanted. The house was eerily silent, broken only by the occasional sweep of headlights across the windows, casting fleeting, pale shadows across the room. In the darkness, I could hear my own heart beating. And then, finally, the sobs I had been choking back all night. Tears came in a hot rush, scalding against my cold hands. For the first time in my life, I felt completely alone, utterly abandoned. The family I thought I could lean on, the bond I had spent a lifetime building. It had all been constructed on the flimsy foundation of money and convenience. In their eyes, I wasn't even worth that. Just an old woman with a measly $2,500 pension, a future burden to be gotten rid of as quickly and quietly as possible. I don't know how long I cried. Long enough for my tears to run dry? Long enough for my heart to turn cold? No, I wasn't going to resign myself to this. I couldn't. For once in my life, I needed to live for myself. Slowly, I lifted my head and stared into the endless black of the night beyond my window. Maybe overhearing their conversation wasn't an accident. Maybe it was the universe giving me one last wake-up call. It was time. Time to reevaluate my life. Time to take my future back. I fumbled for the lamp beside the sofa and flicked it on. The light wasn't strong, but it pushed back the darkness, illuminating the room, and deep inside me, a tiny, stubborn light flickered back to life. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Benjamin. His name glowed on the screen, familiar and heavy. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Mom, why did you leave so suddenly?" Benjamin's voice was thick with concern and confusion. "Amanda said you left a note about an emergency with your neighbor, Ellen." I cleared my throat, steadying my voice. "Yes. Ellen's husband had a sudden heart attack. She panicked and called me for help." It was a lie, and it sat like a stone in my chest, heavy and suffocating. "Oh, is everything okay now?" Benjamin asked. "Yes, it's fine now. They got him to the hospital." I continued the lie, a bitter taste rising in my throat. "Good, good. Mom, please take care of yourself, okay? If anything comes up, you have to let us know." He paused, then added, "I'll try to come see you in a few days." "No need," I said quickly, my voice soft but firm. "Focus on your work. I'm fine here." After I hung up, I let out a long breath, but for some reason, the air felt even heavier. Not long after, Amanda called. "Charlotte, why did you leave without a word?" "We were so worried about you," she said, her voice dripping with a perfectly measured, perfectly sweet concern. But I could hear it, that faint thread of relief in her voice, like someone who had just shrugged off an unwanted burden. "There was an emergency at home." "It's handled now," I said calmly. "Oh, but you have to take care of yourself, okay? Promise me you'll let us know if you ever need anything. Don't try to handle everything on your own," she gushed, her words wrapping around me like a web of careful lies. I murmured a few polite replies and hung up. Staring at the dark screen in my hand, I let out a bitter, broken smile. The cruelest part of it all was knowing I had to play along. To finish the performance they had so carefully staged. To pretend everything was fine. Maybe that's what being an adult really is. Smiling through the bruises, covering the pain with silence. 2 days after Valentine's Day, Benjamin finally came to see me. He sat stiffly on the sofa, fiddling with his hands, like he was carrying something heavy he didn't know how to put down. "Mom, that day," he began, his voice barely a whisper. Did you overhear anything?" My heart gave a little lurch, but my face remained placid, unreadable. "Overhear what?" "No," I said, my tone light and serene. Benjamin stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to read something hidden in my eyes. I held his gaze steadily, outwardly calm, even as my heart was quietly bleeding in my chest. No, I couldn't tell him, not now. If I laid it all out, it would only make things harder for him and for me. There was no point. He finally dropped his gaze, and after a long pause, he mumbled, "Mom, sometimes Amanda. She says things she doesn't really mean. Please, don't take it to heart." In the end, he chose her. I nodded slightly, saying nothing more. The room fell into an awkward silence, broken only by the steady tick-tock of the old wall clock. Benjamin stayed a while longer, fussing over my health and reminding me to take my medicine, before he got up and left. I watched from the window as he hurried down the stairs and disappeared down the street, a small, lonely figure swallowed by the gray afternoon. There was sadness in me. Disappointment, too, but mostly a tired, familiar acceptance. The son I had poured my life into would never truly understand me. After Benjamin left, the house returned to its usual empty quiet. I sat alone on the sofa, listening to the second hand of the clock tick by. Each click was a dull, echoing reminder of how empty my days had become. I began to think, really think, for the first time. What should life after retirement really look like? Grocery shopping, cooking chores, an occasional game of chess, or some small talk with old friends at the park? It was all so flat, so lukewarm, like a glass of water left out too long, not hot, not cold, tasteless and forgettable. That night at Benjamin's, the words I overheard had landed like a muffled thunderclap, cutting through the fog of my complacency. I couldn't live like this anymore. I got up and started sorting through the old house I had lived in for most of my life. I threw open dust-filled closets and pulled out heaps of forgotten odds and ends. Piece by piece, I sorted through them, tossing the useless things into trash bags, carefully setting aside the ones that still meant something. Buried deep within an old wooden chest, I found relics from another life. Yellowed photo albums, One showed me in work clothes, smiling brightly at the factory. Another showed me and my late husband on our wedding day, him in a sharp suit, me in a simple white dress, shyly leaning into him. And then there was Benjamin, chubby and rosy-cheeked, a little boy with a beaming smile. Tucked between the photos were certificates I hadn't seen in decades. Outstanding worker, senior technician, and then a faded, old membership card for the local photography club. I picked it up and gently blew the dust off, running my fingers over the faded gold lettering. And just like that, the memories came flooding back. As a young woman, I had loved photography. Even when money was tight, I saved for months to buy my first camera, a used Canon AE1. Everywhere I went, the camera went with me. I even joined the City Photography Association, learning the tricks of the trade from seasoned photographers. A few of my photos were even featured in the factory's internal newsletters. But life got busier. Bills needed to be paid, Benjamin needed raising, and slowly, photography faded into the background. The camera was relegated to a corner, forgotten under a layer of dust. Remembering it now, those days spent chasing light through a viewfinder were some of the purest, most authentic moments of my life. Hard, yes, but so real, so full. I carefully set the old membership card down and felt a surge of something I hadn't felt in years. A spark of excitement. Why couldn't I pick it back up? I still had time. I still had the strength. I refused to let the rest of my life play out in muted silence, unnoticed by anyone. I rummaged through the closet and, after a bit of digging, I finally unearthed my old Canon camera. I wiped it down with trembling hands, clearing the dust from its body. It was old, a relic, but it was still whole, still beautiful. In that moment, I made a decision. I would enroll in a photography course at the local community college. I would start over, on the right foot this time. My biggest enemy wasn't sickness. It wasn't loneliness. It was surrender. And I was done surrendering. The next day, dressed in a clean, neatly pressed sweater, I walked into the admissions office at the local community college. The admissions officer was kind and patient, helping me enroll in an introductory photography class. Seeing the words Photography 101 printed at the top of the registration form made my heart pound with a mix of nerves and excitement, just like the first time I ever collected a paycheck. Clutching my brand new student ID, I walked out of the building into a sunny afternoon. The light felt like a blessing on my shoulders. In that moment, I could almost see the woman I was in my 20s, camera in hand, eyes wide open to the world. Life at the community college turned out to be even more enriching than I had imagined. Most of my classmates were retirees like me, rediscovering parts of themselves they had left behind. They were full of laughter, easy conversation, and stories that tumbled out of them a mile a minute. Our instructor, Mr. Peterson, was a retired news photographer with a sharp wit and a bottomless well of stories. Every lesson was packed with humor and wisdom, and even his smallest anecdotes had us roaring with laughter. I threw myself into learning. And before long, I found a group of kindred spirits. There was Marta, a former architect, whose photographs of building structures were breathtaking. Tom, a retired philosophy professor who had a passion for capturing street life and candid human moments. And Linda, a bubbly soul whose photos were always bursting with flowers and blue skies. We clicked right away and formed our own little photography group, giving it a funny name, the Golden Lens Club. Every weekend, we would go on photo walks together. My old Canon was clunky compared to everyone's modern gear, but the black and white images it produced had a depth and a soul that no new technology could replicate. Later, encouraged by Mr. Peterson, I saved up a few months of my pension and bought a beginner's DSLR camera. I started learning post-processing techniques, diving into the world of light adjustments, cropping, and color grading. Suddenly, my days were filled with purpose and joy, studying the light, framing shots, tweaking camera settings, perfecting the vibrancy of a photo. I felt like I had traveled back to a time when I was strong, alive, and full of energy. Where time once trickled by like a dripping faucet, now I found myself wishing each day had 30 hours instead of 24. Not long after, the community center announced a photography exhibition titled Living Our Best Lives. Our Golden Lens Club submitted a few pieces. To my astonishment, One of my photos, sunset on Main Street, won second place. The photo captured a quiet small-town street, bathed in a golden twilight, with an old man sitting peacefully on his porch, a pipe between his teeth, completely at ease with the world. That old man was Walter, Ellen's husband, sitting right outside their house on Main Street. After the exhibition, the local newspaper even ran a feature on me, complete with a picture and a headline that read, "Retired factory worker rediscovers passion through the lens." Holding that newspaper in my hands, seeing my name and my picture in print, a deep, indescribable pride welled up inside me. It turns out there are countless ways to live out old age. Just like in photography, change your perspective, and the whole picture transforms. I was no longer anyone's burden, anyone's afterthought. I was the protagonist of my own life. Somehow, Benjamin got a hold of that newspaper article and showed up at my house shortly after. He had the paper in his hand, his face lit up with a mixture of surprise and what almost looked like disbelief and pride. "Mom, you're amazing. You really kept this one under wraps, the award and everything," he laughed, half joking. But the genuine admiration in his eyes was unmistakable. "It's nothing," I said, feigning modesty, though my heart was doing cartwheels inside. Benjamin watched me carefully for a moment. "You look different, I swear," he said. "You seem brighter. There's this energy about you. For the first time, I could feel it." His gaze had shifted. It was no longer the polite, dutiful concern he used to offer. It was real respect, something warmer, something that filled my heart with a soft, quiet joy. A few days later, Amanda called. We weren't far into our chat when she casually dropped, "Charlotte, I hear you're getting really serious about photography? Even winning awards? Those cameras must be pretty expensive, right?" I immediately caught the undertone in her voice. She wasn't just making small talk. She was probing, maybe worried I was burning through my savings. I smiled into the phone. "Oh, it's not that big of a deal. Just a little hobby. I've been learning about some small investments too, saving up some extra cash for equipment." I didn't mention what kind of investments, or how much I'd made. I left her to wonder. There was a brief, almost imperceptible pause on the other end of the line, before Amanda's voice turned even warmer. "Wow, that's so amazing. You're just living your best life, Charlotte. Just take care of yourself, okay? Don't overdo it." After I hung up, I smiled to myself. Funny, isn't it? The less you seek validation, the more cautiously others approach. It's just human nature. Those you lean on will take you for granted. But those who stand on their own make others uneasy. As time went on, my little photography hobby started to gain real momentum. I began uploading my landscape and street photos to an online photography platform. At first, it was just for fun. But slowly, messages started trickling in, people asking to buy the rights to my photos for websites, magazines, or to decorate coffee shops. At a friend's suggestion, I opened a small online store selling prints of my work. At first, I treated it like a side project. But to my surprise, the business started to take off. A few of my photos ended up on the covers of books from small publishers. Some were purchased by independent coffee shops to decorate their walls. Others were bought by individuals to decorate their homes. After deducting platform fees and printing costs, I was making an extra $300 to $400 a month. It wasn't a fortune, but to me, it meant everything. It wasn't about the money itself. It was about proving that I could still create value, on my own terms, in my own way. Amanda eventually heard about my little success story through a mutual friend. After that, her attitude did a complete 180. Suddenly, Amanda was calling me every few days, checking in with a sweetness that bordered on overkill. "Charlotte, are you free this weekend? Come over for dinner. I'm making pot roast. Charlotte, it's getting cold. I bought you a new sweater. When can you come pick it up?" Her enthusiasm was almost suffocating, and I knew exactly what was fueling it. I turned down most of her invitations with a polite smile. "Amanda, that's so sweet, but I'm going away with my photography group this weekend. I don't really need a new sweater. Maybe you could give it to your mom. Thanks for thinking of me, though. I've been pretty busy lately, but I'm taking good care of myself." I told her about my upcoming photography exhibitions, about the long road trips I was planning with my Golden Lens friends, about how busy and exciting my days had become. I held no grudge. I just had no intention of re-entering a relationship built on pretense and convenience. Once you see people clearly, it's easier to let them go. I no longer needed anyone else's approval to measure my own worth. The world likes to define wealth in numbers, but I learned something far more valuable. True wealth is freedom, especially the freedom that comes from living untethered to anyone's guilt, obligation, or expectations. My photography journey was picking up more and more steam. At one exhibition, a well-known local photographer saw my work. He kept praising my photo, Sunset on Main Street, saying it conveyed a rare emotional honesty, warm, real, and full of human tenderness. Thanks to his recommendation, I was invited to feature my work at the upcoming City Arts Festival. It was an honor beyond my wildest imagination. I carefully selected 5 of my best pieces, re-edited, printed, and framed them. On opening day, I wore a new gray-blue trench coat, my exhibitor's badge pinned proudly to my chest. Standing in front of my photos, I felt a mix of nerves and pride churning inside me. The exhibition hall was buzzing with visitors. I watched with a pounding heart as people stopped in front of my photographs, studying them, whispering to each other. Some young people even took out their phones to take pictures of them, framing their shots carefully, almost reverently. The feeling of being truly seen, truly acknowledged, was overwhelming and beautiful. For a moment, it was like I was 30 years old again. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted 2 familiar figures, Benjamin and Amanda. They stood at the edge of the crowd, looking at my photos, then at me. Their faces were an open book surprise, disbelief, and something harder to place discomfort, maybe even a hint of regret. Amanda took a deep breath, plastered on a bright smile, and walked over. "Charlotte, congratulations. Your work is incredible, absolutely professional," she gushed, her voice a little too loud, her expression a little too tight, the emotions churning in her eyes like a storm she couldn't contain. Benjamin followed, clapping me on the shoulder. "Mom? Seriously? I had no idea you were this good." I nodded calmly. "Thank you." Inside, I felt only stillness. The great irony of life, the moment you no longer crave someone's approval, is the moment they rush to offer it. But by then, their applause means nothing. After the exhibition, Benjamin and Amanda insisted on taking me to dinner to celebrate. I let them. We ended up at a cozy Italian restaurant nearby, in a private room. The table was covered with rich, colorful dishes, and the mood felt forced into a kind of strained cheerfulness. Benjamin kept topping off my glass, showering me with compliments. Amanda wore a radiant smile, piling food onto my plate, pampering me with a warmth that was a little over the top. Beneath the surface, I saw it with perfect clarity. This dinner wasn't just a celebration, it was a setup. Sure enough, after the 3rd glass of wine and the 5th course, Benjamin finally put down his cup and spoke, feigning casualness. "So, Mom, Amanda and I have been looking at houses lately." I nodded slightly, waiting for the real reason. "This apartment is getting a little cramped," he continued, "especially if we're thinking about starting a family. We found a place 3 bedrooms, great location, really perfect, but we're just a little short on the down payment." He shot Amanda a quick look. Amanda immediately leaned in, her voice syrupy sweet. "Charlotte, we were thinking, since your photography has been going so well, winning awards and selling pieces and all, maybe you could, help us out a little." Her eyes were bright with expectation, barely concealing the urgency underneath. In the end, it was the same old dance. They wanted money. I smiled to myself. What a predictable routine. I put my silverware down slowly, dabbed my mouth with a napkin, and looked at them, perfectly calm. "A new house sounds wonderful," I said smoothly, as if commenting on the weather, "but I'm afraid I won't be much help." Amanda's smile faltered. Her voice sharpened slightly. "Why not?" "Well," I said, gently tapping the rim of my water glass, "photography isn't exactly a cheap hobby. New equipment, travel expenses for shoots. And lately, I've been pooling funds with a few friends to open a small photography studio. It's going to require a considerable upfront investment." I let that sink in before delivering the final blow, still smiling. "Besides, I'm planning a big trip to Alaska later this year to photograph the northern lights. I've already got the money for that all set aside." Benjamin ducked his head, pretending to take a sip of tea. Amanda's face tightened, disappointment and barely concealed frustration flashing across her face. "How interesting. When you finally build a world of your own, they are left on the outside, knocking at the door in vain." The so-called celebration dinner ended exactly as I expected, not with warmth, but with a quiet, tense departure. A few days later, I received an unexpected call. Patricia, Amanda's mother. Her voice was gushing with enthusiasm, heaping on praise so thick it almost dripped through the receiver. She called me an inspiration, full of hidden talents, and insisted I was living life to the fullest. Then came the real reason for her call. "Charlotte, are you free soon? Why don't you come over for tea? We can catch up." All my instincts went on high alert. Still, I agreed. I was curious, what were they really up to? When I arrived at their house, Patricia greeted me like a long-lost celebrity. The tea flowed endlessly. A spread of imported pastries covered the table, and the compliments kept coming like a broken faucet. Robert, Amanda's father, sat stiffly to one side, looking like he wanted to disappear, managing to force out an occasional awkward chuckle. After a grueling round of small talk, Patricia finally dropped the act. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a honeyed whisper. "Charlotte, there's something I wanted to mention. My son, Amanda's brother, David, he's working on an incredible project right now. Huge potential. It's really big." She lowered her voice even more. "He just needs a little startup capital." I smiled coolly to myself. There it was. Finally, Patricia pressed on, her voice syrupy and insistent. "I mean, I know you have a good eye for investments lately, and with your photography sales going so well, why not get in on it? It wouldn't take much, maybe 100,000. There will be dividends by the end of the year, much easier than earning it one photo at a time." The glint in her eyes was unmistakable. She wasn't seeing me anymore. She was seeing a walking, talking ATM. I lifted my teacup, blew gently on the rim, and said slowly, "Patricia, thank you so much for thinking of me, but I'm afraid I can't help." Her smile froze. "Why not?" she asked, struggling to keep her tone light. "To be honest," I said, setting my cup down carefully, my expression as serious as hers was fake, "I just partnered with some friends to open a photography studio. I'm pretty much tapped out. At this point, I couldn't squeeze out a single dime if I tried." "A photography studio?" Patricia blinked, clearly not expecting that. "That's right," I said with a bright smile. "We're just getting started, up to our eyeballs in it." Her expression soured slightly, but she forced another brittle smile, and the topic was dropped. People reveal their true selves when they think you have something they need. When you're down and out, they ignore you. When you shine, they rush to place a crown on your head. This kind of cheap affection? I had long since learned to smile and politely decline. As for my little studio, it was barely up and running, but we had already landed our first big contract. A travel company fell in love with our photography style and hired us to shoot a promotional campaign for their new Northern Lights tour in Alaska. When the contract was signed and the advance payment hit the account, the whole office erupted like it was Christmas morning. It wasn't just a job. It was a dream I had shelved decades ago, finally coming true. I threw myself into preparations with the excitement of a kid before a school field trip. Researching weather patterns, upgrading gear, cleaning lenses, it was a beautiful frenzy. When Benjamin heard I was going to Alaska for a whole month, he called immediately. "Mom, Alaska? For a month? Are you serious? At your age? It's freezing up there. Are you sure you can handle it?" His voice was laced with concern, but underneath it, there was something else, something harder, sharper. "I'm great," I laughed. "I'll be with the whole team. We'll look out for each other. But a whole month? You're the backbone of that studio, and, all the travel expenses must cost a fortune?" There it was, the real concern. He was afraid I was investing too much in myself. Cutting off the backup plan he had quietly kept in his back pocket. I sighed inwardly, but kept my voice cheerful. "Sure, it's expensive, but this time, the travel agency is footing the bill. As for the studio, Tom and Linda can handle everything while I'm away. Mom, maybe you should think about it a little more. No need. I cut him off gently. The ticket's already booked. I spent my youth tied down by mortgages, tuition fees, and endless responsibilities. Now, it's my turn. I'm not missing another horizon. Hassan was silent on the other end of the line. In our youth, survival was the priority, crushed by loans and obligations we never questioned. But as I got older, I learned the real lesson. Freedom isn't something you are given. It is something you earn, step by step, through effort and deliberation. Alaska turned out to be even more breathtaking than I ever imagined. The auroras danced across the night sky, spilling waves of light like an artist casting entire galaxies onto a canvas. We, a motley crew of veteran photographers, hauled our heavy gear out into sub-zero nights, trudging over frozen ground to capture every fleeting miracle of color. It was exhausting, cold, and grueling work, but my heart hadn't felt so alive in years. It was pure, unfiltered joy. Over the course of a month, not only did we complete the shoot successfully, but our little studio also earned its first substantial paycheck. And most importantly, on this trip, I met someone who would change my life. Her name was Emily Sanchez. She was 2 years younger than me and also a solo traveler chasing the northern lights. We met by chance at a small outdoor market in a quiet town. A conversation sparked, and before long, we realized we had much more in common than just photography. Emily had been a community college professor before she retired. Her husband had passed away a few years ago, and her children had scattered to other states. Now she lived alone, independent, vibrant, and full of stories. We talked about photography, travel, life, and somewhere in the second half of the trip, we became inseparable, taking pictures of each other, sharing meals, looking out for one another. With Emily, everything felt easy and light. There were no ulterior motives, no obligations, just a simple, genuine friendship. As the trip ended, she gave me a tight hug and smiled. "Charlotte, meeting you has been the best part of this whole adventure. When you're all recovered, next stop Iceland? The northern lights are even more spectacular there." "You're on," I laughed, without a moment's hesitation. When I got home, I stared at my growing bank balance, the hundreds of stunning photos stored on my hard drive, the goofy selfies Emily and I had taken together, and I felt a contentment that ran deeper than words. It turned out, life after 60 could be even more exciting than the years before it, especially when you finally stopped wasting time on people and things that didn't deserve you. Emily and I stayed in close touch, trading photos, sharing editing tips, and planning our Icelandic adventure. It felt like life was finally moving forward. I was finally moving forward. But life, unpredictable as ever, threw me a curveball. One morning, while browsing for new gear online, a sudden dizziness washed over me. I felt a numbness down my right side. My words started to slur. My heart sank. I dialed 911 immediately. At the hospital, they confirmed it a mild stroke. Luckily, I got help fast enough to avoid major damage, but the doctors insisted I stay for observation for at least a week. Lying in that sterile hospital bed, under bright fluorescent lights with the antiseptic stench thick in the air, a profound sadness washed over me. Iceland would have to wait. Emily visited almost daily. She brought homemade soup, the latest photography magazines, and a warmth that cut through the chill of the hospital walls. She even helped out at the studio, making sure everything was running smoothly. Her kindness was simple, pure, and real, like sunlight spilling through a frosted window. Benjamin and Amanda came too. They were attentive, moving like the perfect caregivers. Benjamin ran errands. Amanda hovered by the bedside, offering water, peeling fruit, and fussing over me. Watching them, I felt a complex tangle of emotions. I knew deep down how much of their concern was genuine, and how much was pure performance. A week later, I was discharged. The doctors advised me to take it easy, eat carefully, and avoid stress. The day I got home, Amanda made her move. "Charlotte," she said brightly, "since you're just out of the hospital, we're so worried about you being alone. Why don't you come live with us? We can take proper care of you." Her eyes shone with what she clearly thought was convincing sincerity. But I could smell the real motive, sharp and bitter underneath all the sweetness. Real care has no strings attached. Calculated filial piety always stinks. I leaned back on the sofa, cradling the mug of soup Emily had brought me, letting its warmth seep through my fingers and into my heart. "Thank you, Amanda," I said with a kind, firm smile. "But there's no need. I'm recovering well. I'm used to living alone, and I enjoy my freedom." I paused, then added casually, "Besides, Emily lives just a few blocks away. She can pop over if I ever need anything." I watched the flicker in Amanda's face, the smile that tightened just a little too quickly, the tiny glint of something sharp in her eyes. But she recovered fast, pulling the mask of the concerned daughter-in-law back on. Of course. It's just, accidents happen. We just want to be prepared." She hesitated for a moment, then lobbed the real bombshell, her voice light as a feather, almost offhand. "Charlotte, maybe it's time to think about getting a will drawn up? Not for any bad reason, of course, just for security. It's better to have everything in order than to deal with trouble later, right?" There it was. A fox can't hide its tail forever. I smiled sweetly, playing my part to perfection. "A will?" I said, scratching my head as if confused. "Oh, I don't really have much. Just this old house and a small pension. Enough to get by." Then I added breezily, "And my hands are so full right now, the studio keeps me busy. Maybe when things quiet down a bit, I'll think about it." Amanda's eyes darkened for just an instant, a flash of raw frustration she couldn't hide, before she plastered that sweet smile back on her face. Sometimes, playing dumb is the sharpest armor an old woman can wear. After the hospital stay, Amanda's attentiveness became almost comical. She used to call occasionally, but now she was at my house every other day, laden with organic fruits, supplements, and a syrupy sweet smile. "Charlotte, how have you been feeling lately? If you need anything at all, just say the word." She was warmer than any daughter, but her eyes wouldn't stop roaming, scanning my living room, lingering on the shelves, the desk, the drawers, and her casual conversation was anything but. "Charlotte, your photography studio is doing so well, isn't it? What kind of big projects are you working on? Emily, she lives alone too, right? Do you two see each other a lot? Charlotte, it might be time to renovate this place. Imagine how great it would look with a modern touch." Every question was dipped in honey, but it carried a fine, sharp probe just beneath the surface. I knew exactly what she was doing. Still, I smiled politely, kept my tone light, and gave her nothing. But then, one afternoon, everything changed. I had gone to take a shower. Since I was still recovering, I moved slowly, taking my time. When I came out, a towel over my shoulders, I passed by the study, and through the half-open door, I saw her. Amanda, standing by my desk, rifling through papers with the focus of a thief. I crept closer, my heart pounding. She was holding my bank statements and my insurance policies. For a second, the world tilted. The chill that ran through me was more intense than any Alaskan wind had ever thrown at me. She had waited until I was vulnerable, literally bare and defenseless, and started snooping through my private documents. The rage that surged in me almost exploded right then and there. But I forced myself to stop. Not yet. Not now. If I confronted her, I'd lose the upper hand. Better to play it smarter. I cleared my throat loudly from the hallway, my footsteps slow and deliberate as I headed toward my bedroom. I heard a frantic shuffling behind me, Amanda shoving papers back in the drawer, rushing to compose her face before she emerged, as if nothing had happened. "Charlotte, all done?" I didn't hear the water stop, just thought I'd peek in while I was waiting. That smile, that sick, fake smile. It wasn't strangers you had to fear. It was the ones who wrapped their greed in the language of family. That night, after double-checking every lock on every window, I gathered all my important documents. The deed to the house, bank cards, insurance papers, trust agreements, and I locked them all away in the small safe I had quietly installed months ago. A few days later, Emily came to visit. We sat in the kitchen, sipping tea, the pleasant company warming me inside and out. Midway through, Emily hesitated, fidgeting with her mug. "Charlotte, there's something I've been debating whether or not to tell you." "Go on, Emily," I said gently. "No secrets between us." She bit her lip and leaned closer. A few days ago, a strange woman knocked on my door and started asking a bunch of questions about you. Very detailed stuff: your health, your income, whether you have children, if you're planning to remarry. A deep dread settled in my stomach. What did she look like? I asked quietly. Emily described her, and my heart sank. It had Amanda's fingerprints all over it. To be sure, I asked Tom, an ex-cop who now worked with me at the studio, to do a little digging. It didn't take long for the truth to surface. Amanda had hired a private investigator. She had ordered a full background check on me, my finances, and was even trying to look into the lives of my partners. In that moment, whatever shred of hope I had left crumbled. To them, I wasn't family. I was a living lottery ticket they hadn't cashed in yet. And strangely, after the wave of anguish and anger passed, I smiled. If they wanted to play a game, I was more than willing to play along. And this time, I would be the one setting the rules. That day, while Amanda was over, I deliberately picked up the phone and, in a voice loud enough for the whole living room to hear, I called my lawyer, Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller, could you come by my house tomorrow afternoon? I'd like to discuss revising my will. The sooner, the better. The moment the words left my mouth, I heard the distinct clatter of a glass being fumbled in the living room. I smiled to myself. When family turns into scavengers, the best revenge is to give them sleepless nights. The next afternoon, right on time, Mr. Miller arrived. And coincidentally, Amanda showed up too, this time with a basket overflowing with fruit. Seeing the lawyer sitting in the living room, her smile stiffened like a mask glued to the wrong face. It was strained, brittle, almost laughable. I invited Mr. Miller to sit, and making sure Amanda could hear every word, I got straight to the point. Mr. Miller, I said calmly, I'd like to update my will. It's important to have everything in order before it's too late. I gave a theatrical sigh for effect, my voice dropping to a somber tone. Given my age and recent health scares, I think it's best to be very clear. There's the house, my savings, and my shares in the studio. Amanda was perched on the edge of the sofa, peeling an apple with exaggerated care, but her ears were pricked like a hawk's. I've thought about it carefully, I continued, smiling just enough to twist the knife. I plan to leave half of my estate to the Los Angeles Photographers Association to establish a fund for older photographers who, like me, are still finding beauty and passion in their later years. The apple slipped from Amanda's grasp, hitting the floor with a dull, sickening thud. Her face went white. Her lips trembled. Her eyes, wide and frantic, stared at me as if I had just slapped her. "Charlotte, you," she stammered, unable to form a sentence. I ignored her completely, turning back to Mr. Miller to discuss the details of the donation, as if Amanda wasn't even there. Mr. Miller nodded thoughtfully, jotting everything down without a trace of emotion. When we were done and Mr. Miller had left, Amanda remained behind, frozen on the corner of the sofa, an empty shell of her usual cheerful self. "Charlotte, are you serious? Benjamin is your son." I looked at her, my gaze calm and unwavering. "I have thought it through," I said, my voice soft but firm. "Money is just money. I'd rather it leave a meaningful legacy than become a bargaining chip for those who never truly cared." Amanda's face contorted, the fake cheer dissolving into something raw and bitter, but she didn't dare argue. That night, I leaned back on my sofa and opened the feed from the hidden camera I had quietly installed in Benjamin's house a few weeks prior, aimed only at the living room. On the screen, Amanda and Benjamin were arguing heatedly. Amanda was waving her arms in frustration, her voice sharp and shrill. Benjamin sat, slumped, smoking one cigarette after another, his face a mask of despair. I watched them in silence, feeling no triumph. Just a sadness so deep it felt fossilized. The deepest pain in life isn't loneliness. It's realizing that even the bonds of blood can curdle into a cold, transactional hostility. I knew then this ugly charade had to end. The next day, I called Benjamin, Amanda, Patricia, and Robert, inviting them to dinner the following weekend. There was hesitation, tense and guarded voices over the phone, but in the end, they all agreed. On Saturday evening, we gathered at a quiet restaurant. The private room was dimly lit, casting a soft glow that did little to hide the tension at the table. Patricia's eyes darted around nervously. Amanda fussed with her fork, pretending not to notice the tremor in her hands. Benjamin sat stiff and grim, his jaw tight. Only Robert maintained some semblance of composure, but even he couldn't hide the unease in his eyes. The dishes arrived, untouched. The air thickened like wet cement. I cleared my throat, slicing through the silence. "I invited you all here to clear the air," I said calmly, my eyes sweeping over them before landing squarely on Amanda and Patricia. The room froze. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled a small black device from my purse, a voice recorder. Every breath at the table seemed to catch at the same time. I pressed play. "Mom, you know Charlotte only gets, what, a couple thousand a month in retirement? It's barely enough. If she gets sick, we'll have to take care of her, and we just can't." "Exactly. I told you, we have to plan ahead. She's already a financial liability. Better to get her to sign over the deed to the house now, while she's still clear-headed. And let's be honest, her health isn't great. She might not last that long." Amanda's and Patricia's voices rang out, loud and undeniable, each word landing like a slap across the room. This was the art of surviving betrayal, not by enduring it, but by choosing the exact moment to lay your cards on the table. The recording continued to play. No one spoke. No one dared. Amanda's face was ashen, her hands shaking as she gripped the edge of the table. Patricia sat with wide eyes, twisting the edge of the tablecloth in her fingers, panic seeping from every pore. Benjamin stared at Amanda with disbelief and barely contained rage. Robert sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat as he closed his eyes to the wreckage unfolding before him. The truth was out, and there would be no going back. The recording finally stopped. I calmly switched off the device and looked around the table, my gaze steady, unflinching. "This recording," I said quietly, "but it cut through the room like a razor. I captured it during my New Year's visit to your home. I came with the simple hope of a family reunion. And instead, this is what I heard." I paused, letting the words hang in the thick, icy air. So I left. Not because a neighbor had an emergency, but because my own heart was already frozen. Another pause. Then I spoke again, each word measured, deliberate. "These past few months, I've done a lot of thinking. Is a person's worth nothing more than the number in their bank account? Does living on a modest pension mean I deserve to be discarded, conspired against?" I smiled, not with bitterness or anger, but with a quiet, hardened clarity. I realized something. My worth was never in anyone else's hands to begin with, and it certainly isn't diminished by your contempt. My voice was clear and steady, cutting through the thick, suffocating silence. "And so," I continued, "I have officially updated and notarized my will. Every eye was fixed on me. Upon my passing, my house will be donated to the community's senior housing program, providing shelter for elderly residents in need. My savings will go toward my own care, my health, my travels to ensure I live out my final years with freedom and dignity. And the profits and assets from my photography studio will fund the creation of the Silver Dreams Fund through the Los Angeles Photographers Association, to support other senior creators who refuse to fade away." The room was suffocatingly quiet. Amanda's face was chalk white. Patricia kept her head down, silent and shamed. Benjamin's lips moved as if to say something, anything, but in the end, he just closed his eyes, the weight of it all crushing him. Then, the silence shattered. Robert slammed his hand on the table, a loud, angry crack. "You two," he said, his voice tight with rage and shaking with disappointment, "have gone too far. You have disgraced yourselves." He turned to me, his voice breaking, and gave a deep bow from his seat. "Charlotte, I am sorry. I am so sorry. I should have done more. I should have stopped this. Please, forgive us." Benjamin finally broke. He grabbed my hand, sobbing openly, completely undone. "Mom, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Please, give me another chance." Amanda sat frozen, her head bowed, a lifeless sculpture of regret. I sat still, looking at them, not with triumph or vengeance, but with a deep, heart-wrenching sadness. The most fragile thing in the world isn't glass. It's family love, subjected to the crushing weight of greed. I turned to Benjamin, my voice soft but unmoving. "Benjamin, don't cry." He looked up at me, his face wet with tears. "Mother and son, we are blood. That is inseparable," I spoke softly. "But from today on, we live separate lives. I no longer require your love or your respect, and I will not offer you unconditional sacrifice either. We are family, yes, but we are also individuals, standing on our own 2 feet." I let my eyes sweep across the table, lingering briefly on each face before settling into a soft, almost serene smile. In fact, I already have plans for next month. Iceland, Norway. Heading north to chase the aurora, to capture the Arctic light and snow. My new life, I said simply, is just beginning. No one spoke. No one dared. The dinner ended awkwardly, dissolving into silence. Benjamin insisted on driving me home. The whole way back, he gripped the steering wheel tightly, opening his mouth several times, but failing to form any words. When we pulled up in front of my house, I reached for the door handle. Before I could get out, he grabbed my arm. "Mom," his voice cracked. Then he threw the car door open, and in an instant, he fell to his knees on the cold driveway. "Mom, please, I'm begging you, give me another chance." Seeing him kneeling there, his shoulders shaking with sobs, something inside me twisted. This was, after all, the child I had raised with my own 2 hands. I stepped toward him slowly, my heart aching, and gently pulled him to his feet. "Benjamin," I said softly, placing a hand on his trembling shoulder. "We all make mistakes. What matters isn't the apology in a moment of regret. It's the lifelong accountability that comes after." I patted his shoulder, my voice quiet and unwavering. "I didn't say I forgive you, and I didn't say I don't. Some fractures, no matter how you mend them, are never the same. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and family love should never demand endless sacrifice." 1 year later, Emily, 2 old friends from our photography group, and I set off on a road trip across half of America. We photographed the Native American culture on the quiet streets of Santa Fe. We gasped at the towering peaks of the Rocky Mountains. We captured the wild fireworks and raw humanity of Mardi Gras in New Orleans. My photography had improved by leaps and bounds. Through my lens, I was no longer just capturing landscapes, but hearts, stories, the simple, wind-beaten faces of everyday life. Our little photography studio had blossomed too, taking on documentary projects and community exhibitions. My retired life was more intense, more free, and more fulfilling than any chapter that had come before it. Sometimes, Benjamin would fly to whatever city I was exploring, just to spend a few days with me. There was more space between us now. But within that space, there was a quiet, genuine respect. He no longer asked about money, no longer hinted at inheritances. He just listened to my travel stories, studied the photographs I brought back, smiled at my stories. As for Amanda, after that dinner, she never appeared before me again. I heard whispers that her marriage to Benjamin had completely unraveled afterward. Endless arguments, rumors of divorce. But that was their journey now, not mine. I had long since moved on. One day, Emily wrote a short article about my story and sent it to a well-known magazine. The title was "From an Invisible Mother to an Infinite Sky." To our surprise, the article created a sensation. Hundreds of letters and messages poured in, people sharing their own struggles, their lost years, their tentative, hopeful new beginnings. The media began to spotlight senior independence, questioning how society could truly offer its elders respect and freedom. And I, a woman who had only wanted to live a quiet life after retirement, found myself, by a strange twist of fate, becoming a small, shining symbol. I would sometimes get letters from other silver-haired wanderers who asked me how to rebuild a life from scratch, how to love themselves again after years of being forgotten. I answered every single one as best I could. I told them, from the depths of my own experience, it's never too late. Your life can always begin again if you are willing. Right now, sunlight is streaming through my window. A mug of hot tea sits by my hand. All around me, the soft chatter of kindred spirits, fellow travelers, fills the air with laughter and light. And in my heart, There is only excitement for the next adventure. Looking back, all the pain, the betrayals, the disappointments, they were nothing more than scattered stones on the path. They didn't stop me. They built the very road beneath my feet. The final stretch of life isn't about waiting. It's about blossoming. My worth was never printed on a check. My worth was, and always will be, choosing to live fully, bravely, and brilliantly as myself. This is my answer to all those who are still walking this road. My name is Eleanor. I am 70 years old, and until 3 days ago, my own son believed I was a helpless old woman he could manipulate however he wanted. He had no idea how wrong he was. When Ethan broke the index finger on my right hand because I refused to co-sign a $200,000 loan for the new house for Jessica, my daughter-in-law, he thought he had broken me. He thought the pain and humiliation would make me give in. But what he didn't know is that in that exact moment, while I was crying and pretending to be destroyed, I was already planning his downfall. And when we went to the bank the next day and he saw what appeared on the computer screen, he was completely paralyzed because he discovered that his mother was not the poor old woman he thought he knew. Allow me to tell you how we got here. I am a woman who has perfected the art of going unnoticed. For years, after my husband's death 5 years ago, I carefully cultivated the image of the fragile widow everyone expected to see. I dress in discreet clothing, always in shades of gray or brown, never anything flashy. I walk a little slower than necessary. I let my voice tremble slightly when I talk about important things, and I always carry my cane, even though I don't really need it. It's all part of the perfect disguise. My house is modest, my car is old, and when my neighbors see me, they whisper among themselves about poor Eleanor who lives on a meager Social Security check. I've heard their comments. What a shame. So alone, she must be struggling. Her children should help her more. If they knew the truth, they would be speechless. But this appearance of vulnerability is not accidental. It is a strategy I have built meticulously because I have learned that when people underestimate you, they make mistakes, and the mistakes of others become my power. I live in a small 2-bedroom bungalow in a quiet neighborhood. I handle my own affairs with trembling hands that are actually steady as steel, and when my children visit, I always behave like the devoted mother who lives for them. I cook for them. I give them money when they ask to borrow it money. I know they will never pay back, and I listen patiently to their problems while nodding my head like an understanding old woman. All the while, I observe, analyze, and file away every detail of their true intentions. Ethan, my eldest son, is 35 and has always been ambitious, but in that dangerous way where ambition isn't accompanied by hard work or real intelligence. He married Jessica 3 years ago, a 28-year-old woman who, from the first day, looked at me as if I were an obstacle on her path to a better life. She is one of those people who smiles while stabbing you, who hugs you while calculating how much you are worth. During these 3 years, I have watched as they both developed a strange relationship with me. On one hand, they treated me with that feigned condescension reserved for the elderly, but on the other hand, they were always calculating, measuring, subtly asking about my financial situation. Ethan and Jessica's visits became more frequent in recent months, but not because they were concerned about my well-being. They would arrive with cheap cupcakes from the grocery store, feign interest in my health, and then, inevitably, the conversation would drift to money. "Mom, are you sure you're okay financially?" Ethan would ask me with that voice pretending concern. "You should think about the future, about what will happen when you can't take care of yourself," Jessica would add, stroking my hand with a tenderness that made me nauseous because I could see the falsehood behind her eyes. I would nod weakly, sigh as if the weight of the world was on my shoulders, and murmur things like, "Oh, kids, I don't know what I would do without you." During these months, I perfected my performance. I complained of imaginary aches, mentioned bills that worried me, talked about how expensive life was. I even left some bills unpaid on purpose for them to see when they came to visit. I wanted them to completely believe that I was a burden, a deteriorating old woman who depended on their kindness. And it worked perfectly. Their gazes became more greedy, their questions more direct, and their intentions more obvious. But what they didn't know is that every word, every gesture, every insinuation was being recorded in my memory as evidence for the perfect moment. The decisive moment came exactly 1 week ago. A Tuesday afternoon I will never forget. Ethan and Jessica arrived at my house with a smile that didn't reach their eyes and a folder full of papers they carried under their arm as if it were a treasure. "Mom, we have wonderful news," Jessica announced with that syrupy voice she used when she wanted something important. "We found the house of our dreams." They sat in my small living room, on that worn-out sofa I have kept on purpose to reinforce my image of a woman with few resources, and they spread out photographs of a spectacular mansion in one of the most exclusive gated communities in the city. "Look at this beauty, Mom," Ethan said as he passed the photos one by one, as if he were hypnotizing me. 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a huge yard, a pool, a 2-car garage. It's perfect for starting a big family. Jessica nodded vigorously and added details that sounded rehearsed. "And it has a downstairs bedroom that would be perfect for you, Mom. You could come live with us. You'd be so much better taken care of." The way she said it made me understand immediately that this room would be more like my golden prison, the place where they would keep me controlled while they decided what to do with me and my money. For 20 minutes, I listened to their perfectly coordinated presentation. They talked about mortgages, interest rates, unique opportunities that couldn't be missed. "It's a steal, Mom," Ethan insisted. "Normally, a house like this would cost $300,000, but because of problems with the previous seller, we got it for $200,000. Andrea chimed in. "We just need a co-signer with a good credit history, someone trustworthy, and we immediately thought of you." The trap was so well constructed that I almost felt like applauding their performance. I pretended to be overwhelmed by the information, as would be expected of an old woman who supposedly didn't understand complicated finances. "I don't know, kids," I mumbled with a trembling voice. "This co-signing business sounds very serious. What does it mean exactly?" Ethan moved closer, taking my hands in his with a false tenderness that churned my stomach, and explained with that condescending patience used with children. "It means that if for some reason we couldn't pay, you would be responsible for us. But that's never going to happen, Mom. I have a stable job. Jessica works too. We have everything calculated." "But what if something goes wrong?" I asked, perfectly playing the part of the worried old woman. "What would happen to my house? To my things?" Jessica exchanged a quick glance with Ethan, one of those looks they thought I didn't notice, but that I caught perfectly. "Oh, Mom, nothing bad is going to happen," Jessica replied with a nervous laugh. "Besides, think of it this way. If something terrible and unthinkable were to happen, we would take complete care of you. You would never want for anything." It was their elegant way of telling me that if things went wrong, they would take everything I have and make me their total dependent. That night, after they left promising to come back the next day to help me better understand the papers, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea and analyzed every word of the conversation. It wasn't just a simple financial scam. It was a much more sophisticated plan. First, they would make me a co-signer for a property that probably cost much more than they said. Second, once I signed, they would find a way to deliberately default on the loan. Third, when the bank came for my house to cover the debt, they would appear as my saviors, offering to take care of me in their new mansion while they took everything I had built over a lifetime of work. It was a brilliant plan, I must admit, but they had one problem. They completely underestimated their victim. During the next 3 days, while they believed I was considering their generous proposal, I was doing my own research. I called Victoria, my trusted lawyer, a brilliant 40-year-old woman who handles my most important legal affairs and is one of the few people who knows my true financial situation. "Victoria," I said over the phone, "I need you to investigate a property and 2 people. I think they're trying to scam me." I also contacted Thomas, a discreet private investigator Victoria had recommended years ago for another matter. "Thomas, I need you to follow my son and my daughter-in-law. I want to know exactly what they're doing, who they're meeting with, what papers they're handling, and I want it to be completely confidential." In 48 hours, I had a complete file on the scam they were planning. The house existed, yes, but it cost $280,000, not $200,000. Ethan and Jessica had agreed with the seller to pocket the difference. Furthermore, they had been meeting with a real estate attorney who had explained to them exactly how the foreclosure process works. On Friday night, when they returned for the final conversation, I had everything ready for my own performance. I made them coffee, served homemade cookies, and behaved like the perfect grandmother who had finally made a decision. "Kids," I said with a trembling but determined voice, "I've thought a lot about what you told me. And you're right, you've always taken care of me. You've always been there for me." Their faces lit up immediately. "But," I continued, "it's a very big decision for an old woman like me. I need to read all the papers calmly, understand every word." It was then that Ethan's mask began to slip. "Mom, we already explained everything. There's nothing complicated to understand. You just need to sign here and here," he said, pointing to the marked lines on the documents. His tone was no longer that of a patient son. There was an urgency, a pressure that hadn't been there before. Jessica became more nervous. "It's just that the seller is pressuring us, Eleanor. If we don't close the deal this weekend, we could lose the house. Lie after lie, pressure after pressure. I understand the urgency, kids," I replied, keeping my voice soft. "But I can't see these small numbers well. Let me go get my reading glasses." I got up slowly, as any old woman would, and walked to my bedroom. But instead of looking for glasses, I took my phone and sent a pre-written text message. It started, "Activate the plan." When I returned to the living room, they were whispering to each other, clearly discussing strategies to pressure me more. When I returned to the living room with my glasses on, the tension in the air had completely changed. Ethan and Jessica had stopped whispering, but I could see in their eyes that ill-disguised impatience that scammers have when they feel their victim is slipping away. I sat down slowly in my favorite chair, that old rocking chair that squeaks a little, and began to review the papers with the exaggerated meticulousness of an old woman who supposedly understands nothing about finance. "Let's see. It says here that the property is worth $200,000, I murmured, bringing the papers close to my eyes as if it were difficult to read. "But down here there are other numbers I don't understand." Ethan immediately came over, with that forced smile that no longer fooled anyone. "Mom, those are technical numbers from the bank, taxes, and fees. You don't have to worry about that." But I kept insisting, perfectly playing the role of the confused old woman. "It's just that I don't understand why it says one amount here and another here. In my day, when your father and I bought this house, the numbers were clearer." Andrea intervened with that syrupy voice that I was sick of. "Oh, Eleanor, everything is more complicated now because of government regulations. The important thing is that we take care of everything." For the next 30 minutes, I maintained that dance of pretending to read, asking innocent questions, and showing myself to be overwhelmed by the complexity of the documents. But every question I asked was strategic, designed to make them reveal more details of their plan. "And if you get divorced?" I asked suddenly, as if it were a concern that had just occurred to me. "What would happen to the house? And to me as a co-signer?" The question took them by surprise. Ethan stammered, "Mom, why would you say that? We're doing great." But Andrea looked at me with a coldness that confirmed my suspicions. There was no real trust even between them. I kept pressing with seemingly naive but devastatingly precise questions. "What if one of you loses your job? What if you get sick? What if there's an economic crisis like the one we had a few years ago?" With each question, their answers became more vague, more evasive, more desperate. It was like watching two bad actors trying to improvise a script that was falling apart in their hands. "Mom, you can't live thinking about everything bad that could happen," Ethan said, and for the first time, I heard real irritation in his voice. "You have to trust us." That's when I decided to play my first strong card. "Kids," I said with a broken voice, "I'm scared. I'm a lonely old woman, and if something goes wrong, what will become of me?" I allowed tears to well up in my eyes. Real tears, because even though I was acting, the betrayal of my own son hurt me deep in my heart. "This house is all I have. If I lose it, I'll be on the street." It was the perfect moment for any real son to comfort me, to hug me, to assure me that he would never leave me helpless. But Ethan did none of that. Instead, he stood up abruptly and began pacing my small living room like a caged animal. "Mom, you're being ridiculous. We're offering you the chance to live in a beautiful house, to be cared for, to be part of something better." His voice had risen in volume, and there was no trace of the feigned patience left. "But you always have to complicate things. You always have to be so negative." Andrea tried to calm him, but I could see the panic in her eyes. They realized their perfect plan was crumbling. It was then that Jessica changed tactics and decided to play the emotional card. She approached my chair, knelt beside me, and took my hands with a tenderness so false it made me want to pull away immediately. "Eleanor," she said in a soft voice, "I understand your fears. It's normal for a woman your age to feel insecure." Every word was calculated to sound motherly, but the effect was the opposite. "But think of it this way. We are your family. Ethan is your son, your blood. Do you really think we would hurt you?" It was perfect psychological manipulation, using my maternal love against me. "Besides," Jessica continued, "think of the grandchildren you could have. In that big house, you could have your own garden, your own room with a private bathroom. You could spend your final years surrounded by family, not here alone in this old house that needs more repairs every day." It was cruel how she used my loneliness and my age as weapons against me. But what she didn't know was that every word was being recorded by the tiny device Victoria had installed in my locket, a necklace that looked like a simple piece of old lady's jewelry, but was actually state-of-the-art technology. I let the silence stretch for a few seconds, as if I were deeply considering her words. Then I sighed deeply, as if I had made a painful but necessary decision. "You're right," I finally murmured. "I'm a silly old woman who gets scared of everything. You are my family. You're all I have in this world." I saw their faces relax immediately, saw them exchange triumphant glances. They thought they had won. "But," I added, raising a trembling finger, "I need one more night to think about it. It's a very big decision for my old head." Ethan was about to protest, but Jessica put a hand on his arm to stop him. She was smarter. She knew that pushing too hard could ruin everything. "Of course, Eleanor," she said with a radiant smile. "Take all the time you need. But remember that the opportunity won't last forever." That night, after they left, I immediately called Victoria. "I have everything I need from this first phase," I said. "The recordings are perfect. Now I need you to prepare the second part of the plan." Victoria, who knew my true nature much better than my own children, laughed softly on the phone. "Eleanor, sometimes you scare me, but it also gives me great satisfaction to see you give these scammers what they deserve." The next day, Saturday morning, I sent a text message to Ethan and Jessica. "Kids, I've made my decision. I'm ready to sign. Come whenever you can." The reply came in less than 5 minutes. "Perfect, Mom. We'll be there in an hour." So exciting. I could imagine their jubilant faces, their celebratory hugs, their feeling of total victory. If they had known what really awaited them, they would have run in the opposite direction. I spent that hour preparing meticulously. I put on my oldest gray dress, the one that made me look especially frail and helpless. I did my hair carelessly, as an old woman who no longer cares about her appearance would. I even practiced my hand tremor and my hesitant walk. But inside, I was more alert and stronger than ever. I was like a hunter, waiting for the perfect moment to spring the trap. When Ethan and Jessica arrived that Saturday morning, they brought with them a euphoric energy that was almost comical. They entered my house like conquerors coming to claim their territory, carrying folders, special pens, and even a bottle of cheap champagne to celebrate. "Mom, what a beautiful day," Ethan exclaimed with a smile that reached from ear to ear. "It's the perfect day to change our lives for the better." Jessica was wearing a bright red dress she had never worn in my presence before, as if she wanted to celebrate her victory in advance. I behaved exactly as they expected, the nervous but resigned old woman who had finally made the right decision. "Oh, kids," I said with a trembling voice as I led them into the living room. "I didn't sleep a wink last night thinking about all this. But you're right. You know more about these modern things than I do." I served them coffee in my oldest cups, the chipped porcelain ones I had specifically reserved for this occasion, reinforcing my image of a woman with few resources and many worries. Ethan spread the documents on my coffee table with the ceremony of someone about to sign a historic treaty. "Look, Mom, everything is perfectly organized here. You just need to sign on these 3 pages that I've already marked with an X." He pointed to the lines with a golden pen he had surely bought especially for the occasion. It's very simple, just your name and the date. In less than 5 minutes, it will all be done. Jessica added with that syrupy voice I was completely sick of. And then we can go celebrate with a nice lunch. What do you think? I took the first document with hands I pretended were trembling and began to read slowly, moving my lips like old people do when they concentrate hard. Let's see, I mumbled. It says here that I commit to. Oh, kids! These complicated words make me dizzy. It was a perfect performance of an old woman overwhelmed by legal jargon, but in reality, I was reading every clause with the precision of an experienced lawyer. And what I saw confirmed all my suspicions. It wasn't just a simple co-signing, but a total guarantee that included all my present and future assets. Mom, you don't need to read all that, Ethan interrupted with an impatience he could no longer completely hide. Trust us. We already went over everything with our lawyer. It's standard, completely normal. But I continued my charade, pointing to specific paragraphs and asking questions that sounded naive but were actually devastatingly precise. It says something here about real and personal property. What does that mean exactly? Does it also mean my personal things? Jessica exchanged a nervous glance with Ethan before answering. No, Eleanor. That's just a legal formality. It only refers to the house. Nothing else. Lie number 53. But who was counting anymore? Besides, she added with a forced laugh, it won't even be necessary to use that clause because we're going to pay everything religiously. Ethan nodded vigorously. Exactly, Mom. It's just a paper the bank asks for, but nothing bad will ever happen. I kept pretending to read for another 10 minutes, making dramatic pauses and worried sighs, until I finally declared, Well, kids, if you say it's okay, then it must be okay. I took the pen with a hand I exaggeratedly trembled and approached the first document. But just as I was about to sign, I stopped abruptly. Oh, how silly of me. I exclaimed, as if I had just remembered something crucial. I can't sign without my good reading glasses. These ones I have on are for seeing far away. Ethan huffed with barely contained frustration. Mom, you've already reviewed everything. You don't need other glasses to sign your name. But I was already slowly rising from my chair, perfectly playing the part of an old woman obsessed with details. No, son. My doctor always tells me that to read small print I need my special glasses. Give me a minute. I headed to my bedroom with slow, hesitant steps, listening to their desperate whispers behind me. Once in my room, I acted quickly. I sent a coded text message to Victoria. The fish are in the net. I also activated the second recorder I had hidden in my purse, because I knew what was coming next would be the most crucial part of all the evidence. When I returned to the living room with my special glasses, which were actually exactly the same as the ones I already had on, I found Ethan nervously pacing back and forth, while Jessica compulsively checked her phone. Sorry for the delay, kids, I said in my sweetest, most elderly voice. You know how us old folks are with our quirks. I sat down again and took the pen, approaching the first document. But then, as if it were a completely spontaneous thought, I looked up and looked at them with eyes full of feigned maternal love. Before I sign, I said softly, Can you promise me something? Their faces tensed immediately, as if sensing something was wrong. What is it, Mom? Ethan asked cautiously. Promise me, I continued, my voice cracking with feigned emotion, that if anything goes wrong, if you have trouble paying, you'll tell me immediately. I don't want you to suffer in silence, trying to protect me. It was the perfect trap. Any real child would have used that moment to genuinely reassure their mother, to assure her they would never let her down. But these two scammers fell right into my net. Jessica was the first to respond, and her words were like pure gold for my recording. Oh, Eleanor, of course. But the truth is, if we did run into trouble, you'd be much better off living with us in the new house than here alone. Ethan complimented the statement with a brutal honesty that chilled my blood. Exactly, Mom, and if for some reason we had to use your house as collateral, we'd take complete care of you. We'd give you a place to live and you'd never lack food or care. There it was, the full confession of their real intentions. Not only did they plan to use my house as collateral knowing they couldn't pay, but they had already calculated turning me into their total dependent once they took everything from me. It was a diabolical plan of slavery disguised as filial love. But I maintained my expression of an old woman moved by their generosity and murmured, "Oh, kids, you're so good to me. I don't know what I'd do without you." Finally, with great ceremony and feigned trembling hands, I signed the first document, then the second. And when I got to the third, the most important one, the one that made me fully responsible for the debt, I made a dramatic pause. "This last paper looks more complicated," I observed. "Are you sure it's necessary?" The desperation in their eyes was almost palpable. "Yes, Mom," they said almost in unison. "It's the most important one of all." I signed the third document as well, and the moment I put the date, Ethan and Jessica literally sighed with relief. "Done!" Ethan exclaimed, gathering the papers as if they were winning lottery tickets. "It's all settled." Jessica hugged me with an effusiveness that made me nauseous. "Eleanor, you're the best mother-in-law in the world. You don't know the happiness you've given us." They even opened the bottle of cheap champagne and poured 3 glasses, toasting to the bright future that awaited us all. For the next 30 minutes, they kept up a euphoric conversation about the plans for the new house, about what my room would be like, about the family parties we were going to have. It was all a lie, of course, but I let them fantasize while I mentally reviewed every element of my counterattack. When they finally left, carrying the signed documents like trophies of war, I waved goodbye from the door with tears in my eyes and a trembling smile. "God bless you, kids. I hope everything works out." The moment their car disappeared around the corner, my expression changed completely. I went into my house, locked the door, and went straight to the phone. "Victoria," I said when she answered, "it's all done. I have the signatures, I have the recordings, and I have the confessions of their real intentions." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Victoria laughed with that laugh she reserved for moments of absolute legal triumph. "Eleanor, you are a dangerous woman. I feel sorry for your son, but he brought this on himself." The next 3 days were a masterpiece of patience and strategic planning. While Ethan and Jessica celebrated their supposed victory, running around doing bank paperwork and bragging to their friends about their upcoming mansion, I moved silently like a spider weaving the perfect web. Every morning I woke up with a sense of power I hadn't experienced in years, knowing that for the first time in a long time, I was in complete control of the game board. On Monday morning, Victoria came to my house disguised as a government social worker. She carried an official-looking binder, a fake ID, and the bored attitude of someone making routine visits to senior citizens. If anyone had seen her, they would have thought she was just another bureaucrat doing welfare checks. But in reality, we were refining every detail of my revenge. "The recordings are perfect," she informed me, while reviewing the audio on her device. "You have explicit confessions of fraud, emotional manipulation, and premeditated plans to strip you of your assets." Victoria had worked all night preparing a file that would make any prosecutor tremble. "Look at this," she said, showing me high-resolution photographs that Thomas had taken of Ethan and Jessica meeting with their accomplice attorney. "We have them entering and leaving the law firm 3 times in 2 weeks, always with documents related to foreclosures." She also had copies of text messages between them that Thomas had legally obtained through contacts at the phone companies. The messages were devastating. They talked about me as the old fool, calculated how long it would take to get rid of her, and even discussed plans to sell my belongings. "But this is just the appetizer," Victoria continued, with a smile that sent shivers of satisfaction down my spine. "The real surprise comes tomorrow at the bank." She explained that she had been working with the bank manager, a man named Robert, who had been a college classmate of Victoria's and had an impeccable reputation in the financial industry. Robert is outraged by the situation. He says he's seen many cases of financial abuse against the elderly, but never one so blatantly planned as this. On Tuesday afternoon, I received the call I had been waiting for. It was Ethan, his voice trying to sound casual but unable to hide his nervousness. "Mom, we need you to come to the bank tomorrow to finalize some papers. It's just a formality, but your presence is required." I feigned the appropriate confusion. "More papers, son? I thought we were done with all that on Saturday." His response was evasive. Yes, but the bank needs to confirm some details with you directly. It's standard protocol." I could hear Jessica in the background, whispering instructions I couldn't quite make out. That night I couldn't sleep, but not from anxiety, from pure anticipation. It was like Christmas Eve, but instead of presents, I was going to get justice. I got up early, dressed carefully in my most convincing old lady clothes, practiced my expressions of confusion and my hesitant walk. I even put on a little makeup to look paler and more fragile. Every detail was important, because I knew this would be the most crucial performance of my life. At 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning, Ethan arrived to pick me up. He came alone, because, as he explained, Jessica had an important doctor's appointment she couldn't cancel. An obvious lie. She was probably too nervous to face what they believed would be the final formality of their scam. During the drive to the bank, Ethan tried to prepare me for what was coming. "Mom, the manager is going to ask you some questions about your financial situation. Just answer honestly. Don't try to impress anyone or hide anything." "What kind of questions, son?" I asked in an innocent voice. "Oh, normal stuff. How much money you have saved, if you have other debts, if you understand the responsibilities of being a cosigner. It's bank protocol, nothing personal." What Ethan didn't know was that those questions were exactly the ones I had suggested to Robert, designed specifically to create the perfect moment for my revelation. "And if I don't know how to answer a question?" I pressed. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll be there to help you with anything you don't understand." When we arrived at the bank, Robert was waiting for us in his office. He was a distinguished man in his 50s, with that authoritative presence that inspires immediate confidence. His office was perfectly arranged for the occasion. Organized documents, computer on, and an atmosphere of professional seriousness that made Ethan visibly more nervous. "Good morning, Mrs. Eleanor." Robert greeted me with perfect courtesy. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard a lot about you." The meeting began routinely, with Robert explaining the terms of the loan and the responsibilities of a cosigner. I perfectly played the part of the overwhelmed but cooperative old woman, asking basic questions and showing appropriate confusion at the technical terms. Ethan constantly intervened, trying to speed up the process and minimize any complications. "Mom understands everything perfectly," he would say whenever I paused to process the information. It was then that Robert asked the crucial question. "Mrs. Eleanor, to complete this process, I need to verify your current financial situation. Could you provide me with information about your bank accounts and assets?" Ethan tensed immediately. "Is that really necessary?" he asked. "She's a simple retiree. She doesn't have much to declare." Robert looked at him with a seriousness that would have intimidated anyone. "Sir, when someone becomes a cosigner for such a significant amount, the bank is required by law to verify their actual financial capacity." "Of course," I replied with a trembling voice, pretending to be nervous about having to reveal my modest resources. "I don't have much, but I can show you what I have." I took an old, faded passbook savings account from my purse, the same one I had used for years to maintain my charade of poverty. "This is my main account," I said, handing it to Robert with hands I feigned were shaking. "Everything I have is in there." Robert took the passbook and opened it ceremoniously. For a few seconds that felt like an eternity, he studied the numbers in silence. Then he looked up at his computer and began typing. Ethan leaned forward, trying to see the numbers, but from his angle, he couldn't make anything out clearly. "Interesting," Robert murmured after a few moments. "Mrs. Eleanor, are you sure this is your only bank account?" "Yes, sir," I replied with perfect innocence. "Why? Is there a problem?" Robert looked at me over his glasses with an expression that mixed professional surprise with something that looked like admiration. "There's no problem, ma'am. In fact, it's quite the opposite." He turned to his computer and swiveled the screen so both Ethan and I could see it clearly. "According to our records, you have accounts at 3 different banks with a combined total balance of approximately $2.8 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan was completely paralyzed, his mouth agape and his eyes fixed on the screen as if he were seeing a ghost. The numbers were there, clear and incontrovertible. Account after account, investment after investment, a fortune he had never imagined existed. "Furthermore," Robert continued, clearly enjoying the moment, "you have investment properties in 2 different states, a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds, and a trust established 5 years ago that generates a passive income of approximately $15,000 a month. But, Ethan stammered. Mom, you always said you lived on a meager pension. You complained about the bills, about not having enough money. His voice broke on the last word, as if he finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. Robert intervened with a professional smile that had a dangerous edge. Sir, your mother is what we call a discreet investor. There are many older people who prefer to maintain a low profile regarding their true financial situation. I maintained my expression of a confused old woman, as if I didn't understand why everyone seemed so surprised. Have I done something wrong? I asked in a small voice. It's just that my late husband always told me it was better not to show off the money one has. Robert nodded sympathetically. Your husband was a very wise man, Mrs. Eleanor. Financial discretion is a virtue that few practice today. The expression on Ethan's face was an epic poem of shock, disbelief, and growing horror. His eyes darted from the computer screen to my face, trying to process the information he had just received as if it were an alien language. Mom, he finally whispered, in a voice that sounded like it came from beyond the grave. You knew about all this money. I maintained my innocent old woman act to the end. Oh, honey, of course I knew. But your father always told me that you don't go around talking about money in public. It's bad manners. Robert, who was obviously enjoying every second of the revelation, continued reading from his screen with the meticulousness of a public accountant. I also see here that you have certificates of deposit worth $500,000 maturing next year, and an overseas investment account that, well, I'd rather not mention the specific numbers for privacy, but let's just say it's considerable. Every word was like a hammer blow to Ethan's head, who had gone from total euphoria to absolute desperation in a matter of minutes. But then, Ethan managed to articulate after several failed attempts. Why did you live as if you had no money? Why did you complain about the bills? Why did you borrow money for house repairs? His voice had risen an octave, like a teenager confronting his parents over a perceived injustice. It was pathetic to see him like this, but also extraordinarily satisfying. Oh, my love, I replied with that infinite patience reserved for small children. It's because your father taught me that the best way to know people is to see how they behave when they think you have nothing to offer them. The blow was devastating and precise. I saw the full understanding of what I had been doing for years finally penetrate his brain. It wasn't just that I had money. It was that I had been testing him, evaluating his character, measuring his genuine filial love versus his greed. And he had failed spectacularly on every test. For these past few years, I continued in a soft but relentless voice. I have been waiting for one of my children to visit me simply because they love me, not because they need something from me. Robert, who had been perfectly briefed by Victoria on the exact timing of each revelation, chose that moment to introduce the next element of our strategy. Mr. Ethan, he said in a professional tone but with an unmistakable subtext of reproach, given your mother's real financial circumstances, I must ask, are you absolutely sure you want to proceed with this loan? The question sounded innocent, but it was loaded with implications. If Ethan had any emotional intelligence, this was the perfect moment to back down, apologize, and try to salvage something of his relationship with me. But Ethan had no emotional intelligence. Instead, he had pure greed and desperation. Of course we want to proceed, he replied with an aggressiveness that surprised even Robert. My mother has already signed all the papers. She has agreed to be the co-signer. His voice had taken on a defensive and slightly threatening tone, as if Robert were the enemy trying to stand between him and his prize. Besides, if she has so much money, then there's no risk for anyone, right? It was the perfect answer for my purposes. Instead of showing remorse for trying to scam me, or gratitude for discovering his mother was not the destitute old woman he believed, Ethan had chosen to double down. He had publicly confirmed, in front of an official witness from the bank, that he knew exactly what he was doing and had no intention of stopping. You're right, son, I said with a smile that he interpreted as maternal submission, but was actually pure predatory satisfaction. There's no risk for anyone. Robert then proceeded with the most delicious part of the whole plan. Very well, then let's complete the process, he announced, pulling a new folder from his desk. Mr. Ethan, I need you to sign these additional documents. Ethan, still reeling from the revelation about my fortune, took the papers without reading them carefully. If he had been smarter, he would have noticed that among the documents were sworn affidavits about his intentions, liability waivers, and most importantly, authorizations for the bank to record all our conversations as part of its fraud prevention protocol. What are these papers? He asked, distractedly, as he signed page after page. Standard bank protocol. Robert replied with the authority of someone who has handled thousands of similar transactions. Declarations of good faith. Confirmations that you understand the terms of the loan, authorization for additional credit checks. Every signature Ethan put on those documents was another nail in his own legal coffin, but he was too overwhelmed by greed and confusion to realize it. When we finished with the paperwork, Robert escorted us to the door of his office with perfect professional courtesy, and Mrs. Eleanor, he said, taking my hand in his with a respect that was completely genuine, it has been a true honor to meet you. Your husband must have been a very intelligent man to have taught you so much about finance and discretion. Then he turned to Ethan with an expression that had subtly changed. Sir, I hope you appreciate the blessing you have in such an exceptional mother. During the drive back to my house, Ethan drove in a silence that was almost physical in its intensity. I could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to process not only the information about my fortune, but also the implications of what had just happened. Finally, when we were 2 blocks from my house, he exploded. Mom, I can't believe you lied to me all these years. I thought you were struggling financially. I was worried about you. You were worried about me? I asked, my voice maintaining its soft tone but having acquired an edge he had never heard before. Is that why you came with Jessica to pressure me into co-signing for a house you can't afford? Is that why you broke my finger when I initially refused? That was your way of showing concern. It was the first time in this whole charade that I had directly mentioned his physical aggression, and the effect was immediate. Ethan turned as white as a ghost. Mom, I was very stressed. I didn't mean to hurt you. His voice disintegrated into pathetic stutters. Besides, I thought you really needed our help, that being alone in that old house wasn't good for you. Each excuse sounded more desperate than the last. And Jessica and I thought that living with us would give you a better quality of life in your final years. My final years? I repeated slowly, savoring the words. You've already decided for me how much time I have left. The car stopped in front of my house, but neither of us made a move to get out. Ethan, I continued, and for the first time in years I used his full name instead of son or my love. Do you really think I didn't notice that your visits increased when you started having financial problems? Do you think I didn't notice that Jessica started asking questions about my will and my properties? The confrontation I had been avoiding for months was finally happening, but now I held all the cards. Do you think I'm so foolish as to not realize that you two were planning something when you started talking about houses, loans, and the convenience of me living cared for by you? Ethan opened his mouth to protest, but I continued relentlessly. And did you really think that a woman who managed to build a fortune of almost $3 million wouldn't notice when her own children tried to scam her? The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Finally, Ethan found his voice, but when he spoke, he sounded like a child caught in a lie. Mom, we never wanted to scam you. We just thought that it would be better for everyone if... If what, Ethan? I interrupted him. If you stole my house? If you turned me into your dependent? If you took away my independence and my dignity so that you could live in a mansion you haven't earned? The truth was finally on the table, raw and unadorned. Ethan completely collapsed, resting his head on the steering wheel like a defeated man. I didn't know what to do, he mumbled. Jessica and I have so many debts, so many problems. I thought that if you had that house, and if something happened, we could take care of you and take everything I have. I finished the sentence for him. Yes, Ethan, I understand perfectly what you thought. I got out of the car with the serene dignity of a queen who has just witnessed a traitor's confession. Ethan remained seated, clutching the steering wheel as if it were the only thing keeping him anchored to reality. Mom, wait, he shouted as I headed for my front door. We need to talk about this. We need to fix things. I stopped without turning to look at him and replied with a voice colder than January ice. There's nothing left to fix, Ethan. You made your choice when you decided your mother was an obstacle to be removed instead of a person to be loved. I entered my house and closed the door, but not with the dramatic slam he expected. It was a definitive, final closure, like the sound of a tomb being sealed forever. From my window, I watched him stay there for almost 10 minutes, probably waiting for me to come out to comfort him, to forgive him, to behave like the devoted mother I had always been. But that woman had died the moment he broke my finger. The woman who remained was someone completely different. As soon as his car disappeared around the corner, I dialed Victoria's number. Phase 1 is complete, I informed her. I have his full confession recorded in the car. I have his shock documented in the face of my real finances, and I have his confirmation that he will proceed with the scam despite knowing the truth. Victoria laughed that scary laugh of hers. Eleanor, you're more ruthless than any lawyer I know. Now comes the really fun part. For the next 48 hours, Ethan and Jessica lived in a bubble of denial and self-deception that was fascinating to observe. Thomas, my private investigator, kept me informed of all their movements. They had decided to proceed with the purchase of the house as if nothing had happened, as if the discovery of my fortune was simply an interesting but irrelevant detail to their plans. They're acting like they won the lottery, Thomas reported. Yesterday they went to an expensive furniture store and spent $4,000 on a living room set, all on credit. On Thursday morning, Jessica had the audacity to call me. Her voice was a toxic mix of false concern and calculated manipulation. Eleanor, I'm so worried about you. Ethan came home very upset after the visit to the bank. He says you're angry with us. I feigned perfect confusion. Angry? No, honey, I'm not angry. I'm just surprised that you want to proceed with buying the house now that you know I'm not the poor old woman you thought I was. Jessica stammered for a few seconds before replying. It's just that, Eleanor, the money doesn't change anything between us. We love you the same, whether you have a lot or a little. It was such a blatant lie that I almost wanted to applaud her audacity. Of course, dear, I replied with venomous sweetness. True love isn't measured in money. That's why I'm sure that if I were really poor like you believed, you would have loved and cared for me exactly the same, right? The question left her speechless, because we both knew the real answer. If I had genuinely been the destitute old woman they thought, they would have never offered me a room in their new mansion. They would have let me rot in my old house while they enjoyed their upgraded life. Of course we would, she finally managed to say, but her voice sounded as hollow as an empty drum. We've always been willing to take care of you. On Friday evening, I received a visit I had been expecting. It was Ethan, but this time he came alone, and with a completely different expression. He was no longer the manipulative, aggressive son of the previous days. Now he was a desperate man who had finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. Mom, he said from the doorway, can we talk? Please. His voice was that of a scared child, not the adult who had broken his own mother's finger. I let him in, but this time I didn't offer him coffee or cookies. I didn't point to the sofa or make any gesture of maternal hospitality. I simply sat in my favorite chair and waited for him to speak first. Mom, he began with a broken voice, I know I made terrible mistakes. I know I hurt you, I lied to you, I tried to take advantage of you. Each word came out as if it were tearing pieces from his soul. But you need to understand, I was desperate. Jessica and I have huge debts. We're about to lose our apartment, and I thought that you... You thought what, Ethan? I interrupted him with a voice I didn't recognize as my own. Did you think I was a stupid old woman you could manipulate? Did you think that after you broke my finger, I'd be so scared I'd sign anything? Or did you think that after years of pretending to love me only when you needed money, I wouldn't realize your true intentions? Each question was a verbal slap, and he flinched with each one. No, Mom, I do love you, he protested weakly. I've always loved you. It's just that the circumstances, I repeated with infinite contempt. Ethan, for the last 5 years, since your father died, you have visited me exactly 23 times. And on 21 of those visits, you ended up asking to borrow money. Do you really want me to believe that's love? The numbers were devastatingly precise because I had kept an exact count of every interaction. But I always intended to pay you back, he said with growing desperation. Things have been tough, but I always thought that when my situation improved— Ethan, I interrupted again, you have borrowed $18,400 in 5 years. You have never paid back a single cent. You have never asked me how I'm really doing, what I need, if I'm lonely or scared. You only show up when your credit card is maxed out. The silence that followed was painful for both of us, but for completely different reasons. He suffered because he finally understood how he had failed as a son. I suffered because I had finally verbalized years of accumulated pain and disappointment. What do you want me to do? He finally asked with a broken voice. How can I fix this? It was the question I had been waiting for, because his answer would determine if there was any microscopic chance of salvation for him. I want you, I said slowly, to cancel the purchase of that house immediately. His face fell as if I had asked him to cut off his own arm. I want you to tell Jessica the truth about what you were really planning to do to me. He turned even paler, if that was possible. And I want you to seek professional help for your financial problems instead of trying to steal from your mother. Each demand was reasonable and feasible, but to him, they sounded like death sentences. Mom, you can't ask me to do that, he protested, with a desperation bordering on hysteria. We've already signed contracts. We've made plans. Jessica has already told her whole family about the new house. If we cancel now, we lose the entire down payment. We lose the opportunity. And Jessica. He stopped abruptly, realizing what he had just revealed. He wasn't worried about hurting me. He was worried about disappointing Jessica and his public image. Ah, I said with a smile that must have been scarier than any scream. I see. Your real concern isn't that you betrayed me. Your real concern is that Jessica will realize you're not the successful man she thought she married. It was the final blow, the revelation that even in his moment of supposed contrition, he was still fundamentally selfish. Ethan stood up abruptly from his chair, and for a terrible moment, I thought he was going to become violent as he had the week before. But instead, he headed for the door with the hesitant steps of a drunkard. This isn't over, Mom, he muttered without looking at me. You signed those papers. You are the official co-signer on our loan. If we can't pay, the bank will come after you, and then you're going to need our help. It was a direct threat, the final confirmation that there was no real repentance, only resentment for being caught. You're right, Ethan, I replied with a calm that surprised even me. This isn't over. But it's not going to end the way you expect. When the door closed behind him, I sat in the darkness of my living room, feeling a strange mixture of deep sadness and fierce satisfaction. The motherly part of me mourned the son I had lost forever, but the warrior part of me prepared for the final battle. On Monday morning, at exactly 9 o'clock, my phone rang with the punctuality of a Swiss watch. It was Victoria, and her voice had that electric quality it gets when she's about to unleash a legal storm of epic proportions. Eleanor, she said without preamble, it's time to show your son what it really means to go up against a woman who knows power. Her tone was not that of a lawyer speaking to her client. It was that of a general coordinating the final attack. Over the weekend, while Ethan and Jessica prematurely celebrated what they believed was their definitive victory, Victoria and her team had worked like ants, building a case that would be remembered in legal circles for years. We have everything, she informed me with evident satisfaction. The audio recordings of their confessions, Thomas's photographs documenting their meetings with accomplices, copies of all the fraudulent documents, witness testimonies, and even medical records of your broken finger confirming the physical assault. But the pièce de résistance of our legal arsenal was something not even Ethan could have imagined in his worst nightmares. Remember I told you there was something more? Victoria continued with an audible smile in her voice. It turns out the house they're trying to buy has a complicated legal history. The seller doesn't have a clean title to the property. There are 2 pending lawsuits related to structural problems. And the most beautiful part of all, the real market price isn't $200,000 or $280,000. It's $140,000. The information landed like a nuclear bomb on my understanding of the whole plan. Not only were Ethan and Jessica trying to scam me, but they were also being scammed by the seller and probably by their own lawyer. It was a chain of deceit where each link thought they were taking advantage of the next, not realizing they would all end up destroyed. This means, I calculated quickly, that they're going to overpay by $140,000 for a property that is legally not worth owning. Exactly, Victoria confirmed. And since you're the co-signer, you would technically be responsible not only for the fraudulent loan amount, but also for all the legal claims associated with the property. It's a financial disaster that could easily cost $500,000 or more in the long run. It was the perfect plan to completely destroy any victim. Not only would they lose their current house as collateral, but they would be indebted for life with endless legal problems. On Tuesday morning, I set the final phase of my revenge in motion. I called Ethan with the sweetest, most maternal voice I could muster. "Son, I've been thinking a lot about everything we talked about. I think you're right about some things." I could hear his surprise and renewed hope through the phone. "Really, Mom? You've changed your mind?" His voice was that of a child who has just been forgiven after a terrible mischief. "Yes, my love," I continued with my final master performance. "I've decided that instead of co-signing your loan, I'm going to buy the house for you directly, in cash." The silence on the other end of the line was so complete that for a moment I thought the call had been disconnected. Finally, I heard his ragged breathing. "What? What did you say, Mom?" "You heard me, son. I'm going to pay the full $200,000 so you can have your house without any bank debt." The euphoria in his voice was almost comical. "Mom, you're incredible. You're the best mother in the world. I can't believe you're going to do this for us." It was pathetic how his suddenly renewed love appeared the exact moment he thought he was going to receive a free fortune. "But there's one condition," I added, and his tone immediately shifted to one of caution. "What kind of condition?" "I want us all to meet at the bank tomorrow to make the official transfer. You, Jessica, Robert the manager, and me. A full family ceremony." On Wednesday at 11 in the morning, we gathered in Robert's office as if for a family celebration. Ethan and Jessica arrived dressed as if they were going to a wedding. She in a bright green dress that screamed new money, and he in a suit he had probably bought that morning on credit. Both had that poorly disguised look of triumph that scammers have when they think they have finally pulled off their masterstroke. "Eleanor," Jessica exclaimed, hugging me with an effusiveness that made me want to vomit. "I can't believe how generous you are. You're the best mother-in-law in the world." Ethan kissed my forehead with a tenderness that had been absent for years. "Mom, this means everything to us. It means we can start a new life, start a family, be truly happy." Every word was a lie wrapped in emotional manipulation, but I let them play it out to the end. Robert, who had been perfectly instructed on his role in the final drama, received us with the solemnity appropriate for the occasion. "Mrs. Eleanor," he announced ceremoniously, "it's truly beautiful to see a mother support her family in this way. We don't witness such an extraordinary act of generosity every day." Then he turned to Ethan and Jessica. "You are very fortunate to have such a mother." Before we proceed with the transfer, I said with a voice trembling with feigned emotion, "I want to say a few words." The three of them settled into their chairs like an audience awaiting an inspirational speech. "For these past few years," I began, "I have been watching, learning, evaluating. As a mother, you always hope for the best from your children, but you must also be prepared for the worst." Ethan and Jessica nodded understandingly, thinking this was about general motherly wisdom. "Ethan," I continued, looking him directly in the eyes, "do you remember when you broke my finger because I refused to co-sign?" His face turned white as a sheet. Jessica looked at him in genuine shock. Apparently, he had never told her about his episode of physical violence. "Do you remember when you told me that if anything went wrong with the loan, I would be better off living as your dependent while you took my house?" Now Jessica was also turning pale. Robert, playing his part perfectly, frowned with professional concern. "Excuse me? There was physical violence involved in this transaction?" His tone had changed completely, from ceremonial to alarmed. "Mr. Ethan, is it true that you physically assaulted your mother to pressure her into being a co-signer?" The question hung in the air like a sword over Ethan's head. "No, it wasn't like that," Ethan stammered desperately. "It was an accident, we were arguing and—" But Robert was already taking official notes, and Jessica was looking at him as if she were seeing him for the first time. "Mrs. Eleanor," Robert continued with growing authority, Do you have medical documentation of this injury? I pulled from my purse the x-rays and the medical report that Victoria had advised me to get. Of course, I replied with deadly calm. At that moment, as if choreographed by the gods of justice, the office door opened and two uniformed police officers entered, followed by Victoria in her most impressive suit, and a man I didn't recognize but who was obviously someone important. "Good morning," Victoria announced with the authority of an attorney general. "I am Mrs. Eleanor's lawyer, and these officers have arrest warrants for financial fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit theft." The silence that followed was so perfect you could hear the buzz of the fluorescent lights. Ethan and Jessica were completely frozen, like deer in the headlights of an oncoming truck. "Ethan Miller and Jessica Miller," the taller officer said, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit financial fraud against a senior citizen, extortion, and in Mr. Miller's case, physical assault against a vulnerable person." The moment the handcuffs closed around Ethan's wrists was poetically perfect. The metallic click echoed in the office like a bell of justice, and I watched his face go through all the stages of shock, denial, horror, understanding, and finally, a desperation so deep it almost made me feel pity. Almost. "Mom!" he yelled as the officers pulled him from his chair. "This is a misunderstanding. You can't do this. I'm your son." His voice broke on the last word, as if he finally understood that argument no longer held any power over me. Jessica, for her part, had descended into a kind of hysterical breakdown that would have been comical if it weren't so pathetic. "This can't be happening," she shrieked while struggling uselessly with the second officer. "Eleanor, you're insane. We were only trying to help you. Ethan would never hurt you." Every word she screamed only worsened their legal situation, providing additional evidence of her complicity in the plan. Victoria approached me with that smile of professional satisfaction that appears when a perfect case reaches its perfect conclusion. "Eleanor," she murmured in my ear as we watched the two scammers being led away, "this will go down in legal history as the perfect case of poetic justice. Not only did we arrest them for what they did to you, but we saved them from falling into an even bigger scam with that fraudulent property." It was true. In a delicious irony, my revenge had also been their salvation from an even worse financial disaster. The man who had entered with Victoria introduced himself as Detective Thomas Rodriguez, a specialist in crimes against the elderly. "Mrs. Eleanor," he said with a genuine respect that warmed my vengeful heart, "your case is going to help dozens of other victims. The recordings you obtained, the patience with which you documented every aspect of the scam, the way you allowed them to completely incriminate themselves, it's professional-level work." His words made me realize that my suffering had served a greater purpose. After Ethan and Jessica were taken away, Robert, Victoria, and I were left alone in the office. The contrast between the current tranquility and the chaos of minutes before was surreal. "Now comes the really interesting part," Victoria announced, opening a folder she had brought with her. "While investigating your case, we discovered that Ethan and Jessica have been running similar scams for years. You weren't their first victim, you were just their biggest." The revelation hit me like a hammer. "What do you mean?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Victoria spread photographs and documents across Robert's desk. Jessica's mother, an 82-year-old woman with early-stage Alzheimer's, loaned them $50,000 for the down payment on their current apartment. Ethan's uncle, a 75-year-old widower, was pressured into co-signing a car loan they never paid. There was more. An elderly neighbor was loaned them $15,000 for emergency medical expenses that never existed. Jessica's godmother gave them $30,000 for a supposed family business they never started. It was a systematic pattern of exploiting senior citizens. A criminal career that had been going on for years, while I thought I simply had a son with financial problems. Robert, who had remained silent during this revelation, finally spoke. "Mrs. Eleanor, what you did wasn't just protecting yourself. You stopped a criminal operation that would have continued to victimize elderly people for years." His words made me understand that my personal revenge had evolved into something much larger. Real social justice. In the following weeks, as the case unfolded in the courts, I became something I had never expected to be: a national symbol of resistance. The media got hold of the story and turned it into a modern legend. The grandma who snared the scammers, 70-year-old widow proves experience, Trump's greed, the perfect revenge. How one senior citizen defeated her own conman's son. Interview requests came in an avalanche. Television producers, journalists, writers, everyone wanted to know the details of how I had managed to lay the perfect trap. But what I was most proud of was not the fame. It was the thank you calls. Seniors from all over the country contacted me to tell their own stories of financial abuse by family members, inspired by my example to fight back. 3 months after the arrest, I received a call that would change the rest of my life. It was a representative from the United States Senate, informing me that I had been selected to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom for my contribution to the protection of vulnerable older adults. "Mrs. Eleanor," she said with an emotional voice, "your case has inspired legislative changes in elder protection and has given hope to thousands of victims of family abuse." The award ceremony was surreal. There I was, a 70-year-old widow who a year earlier had been feigning poverty in a modest house, standing at the main podium in Congress receiving a medal from the president himself. My speech was simple but powerful. Never underestimate the power of a woman who has decided she will no longer be a victim. Age is not weakness. It is experience. And experience, well used, is the most lethal weapon there is. But the real satisfaction came 6 months later, when Victoria informed me of the final sentences. Ethan received 5 years in prison for fraud, extortion, and assault on a senior citizen. Jessica received 4 years for complicity and conspiracy. Both were left with permanent criminal records that would make it impossible for them to ever work in any industry involving the handling of money or the care of vulnerable people. More importantly, the judge ordered that all the money they had scammed from their previous victims be returned with interest from my own funds, which I voluntarily donated. Jessica's mother with Alzheimer's got her $50,000 back, plus an additional $20,000 for her medical care. Ethan's uncle not only got his money back but received enough compensation to pay off his mortgage completely. With the remaining money from my fortune, I established the Eleanor Foundation for Elder Protection, the first organization in the country dedicated specifically to investigating, preventing, and legally pursuing family financial abuse. Victoria became the legal director, Thomas the director of investigations, and Robert the financial director. It was a perfect team of people who had seen the darkest side of human nature and had decided to fight against it. A year after the arrest, I was sitting in my new office, no bigger than my old living room, but with a view of a beautiful garden where victims of financial abuse came to receive free legal advice. On the wall hung my national medal, but also photographs of the 37 families we had helped recover over $2 million stolen by family scammers. That afternoon, while reviewing new cases, my phone rang. It was a 65-year-old woman named Martina, whose son had started pressuring her to sell her house and move into a nursing home for her own good. Her story was chillingly familiar. Visits that increased when he had financial problems, questions about her will, comments about how expensive her house was to maintain. "Mrs. Eleanor," she said with a trembling voice, "I heard your story on the radio. I think my son is trying to do the same thing yours did." "Martina," I replied, with the firm voice of someone who has walked through that fire and emerged victorious. "You've called the right place. And you've called just in time. Right now, your son thinks you're an easy victim. We're going to teach him that he is completely wrong." As I listened to the details of her situation, I felt that familiar sense of power and purpose. It was time to hunt again. Some bites are fatal, and I had become the widow who bites back.